I never thought I'd be telling this story, but sometimes life takes unexpected turns that you can't ignore. Emily and I had been together for 8 years, and we got married in 2021. We shared a passion for adventure, and this year we decided to embark on a trip of a lifetime, a journey to the Everest Base Camp in Nepal. Little did I know, this trip would test our relationship in ways I could never have imagined. Our journey began in Kathmandu, the bustling heart of Nepal. The city was a whirlwind of vibrant colors, rich history, and a cacophony of sounds. Emily and I spent our first day exploring the ancient temples and bustling markets. We were full of excitement and anticipation for the trek ahead. That night, as we lay in bed, we talked about our dreams, our future, and how this trip was a testament to our love and partnership. The next morning, we flew to Lukla, known for its tiny and treacherous airport. The flight itself was an adventure, with stunning views of the Himalayas and a nerve-wracking landing on a short runway perched on the edge of a cliff. Upon landing, we met the rest of our group, 12 other trekkers and our 3 local guides. Among the guides was Raj, a charismatic and knowledgeable local who immediately captured everyone's attention with his stories and expertise. The 15-day trek promised breathtaking views, physical challenges, and a chance to strengthen our bond. On the first day, we trekked through lush forests, crossing suspension bridges that swayed gently above rushing rivers. The scenery was breathtaking, and Emily and I felt closer than ever. But as the days passed, I started to feel that something was off. 2 days into the trek, I noticed Emily spending a lot of time with Raj. Initially, I brushed it off. She was naturally friendly and curious, and Raj had a lot of interesting information to share about the local culture and geography. But then my friend Mark, who was also on the trek, pulled me aside one evening. "Joe, I've been watching Emily and Raj. They seem too close. Just be careful, okay?" Mark's words struck a chord with me, planting a seed of doubt in my mind. I started paying more attention to Emily and Raj, noticing how they laughed together, how she seemed to seek him out for advice. Raj was charming, no doubt, but something about their interactions felt too familiar, too intimate. The third day, we ascended to Namche Bazaar, a bustling village perched on a mountainside. It was a challenging climb, but the view was worth it. Namche was a colorful hub of trekkers, locals, and traders. That evening, as we gathered around a warm fire in a tea house, Raj entertained us with local folklore and stories of past treks. Emily sat close to him, her eyes shining with interest and admiration. I couldn't shake the growing unease in my chest. By the fifth day, we had formed a routine. Wake up early, pack up, trek for hours, stop for lunch, and then continue until we reached the next village. Raj was always at the front, leading the way, with Emily often by his side. I tried to keep up, to join their conversations, but I felt like an outsider. Mark, noticing my discomfort, tried to distract me with jokes and stories, but my mind was elsewhere. On the seventh day, we reached Tengbach, home to a famous Buddhist monastery. The serenity of the place was palpable, and we attended a prayer ceremony. The monks chanted, and the air was thick with incense. Emily and I stood side by side, but I felt a chasm between us. That night, in our small shared room, I tried to talk to her about my feelings. "Emily, I feel like something's changed between us. You're spending so much time with Raj," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "Joe, you're being ridiculous," she replied, her tone dismissive. "Raj is just a friend. He's our guide, for God's sake." "But it feels like more than that," I insisted.
You're just being paranoid, she snapped.
"I love you, Joe. Don't ruin this trip with your insecurities." Her words stung, and I felt a pang of guilt. Maybe I was overreacting. But the doubt remained, festering like an open wound. The next few days were grueling. The altitude was taking its toll, and every step felt like a monumental effort. We reached Dingbach, a small village surrounded by towering peaks. The landscape was stark and beautiful, and we spent a day acclimatizing. Emily and Raj went off on a short hike together while I stayed behind, nursing a headache and my wounded pride. By the 10th day, we were nearing the base camp. The landscape had changed dramatically. We were surrounded by glaciers and the towering presence of Everest itself. My excitement was tempered by the growing distance between Emily and me. We hardly spoke, and when we did, it was strained and awkward. One night, as we were approaching Lobuch, we were hit by an unexpected snowstorm. The winds howled, and visibility dropped to almost nothing. Our guides were experienced, but even they seemed worried. We took shelter in a small tea house, crammed together with other trekkers and locals. The storm raged outside, and the mood inside was tense. That night, huddled together for warmth, Emily and I finally had a moment of peace. I held her close, trying to ignore the nagging doubts and just focus on the here and now. But even as we shared that brief moment of intimacy, I could see her eyes drifting towards Raj, who was sitting across the room, deep in conversation with some of the other trekkers. The turning point came on the 12th night. We were at Gorak Shep, the last stop before Everest Base Camp. The night was cold and clear, with stars shining brightly above. That evening, as everyone settled into their tents, I pretended to sleep, my mind racing with suspicions. Around midnight, I heard the faint rustle of fabric. Through the dim moonlight, I saw Emily slipping out of our tent. She moved quietly but purposefully towards the guide's tent. My heart pounded as I watched her disappear inside. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My anger and hurt took over, and I stormed out of my tent. I headed straight for the guide's tent, my mind a blur of emotions. As I approached, I could hear hushed voices inside, confirming my worst fears. With a burst of fury, I tore open the tent, catching Emily and Raj in a compromising position. Chaos erupted. There was shouting, accusations, and a physical altercation. The other trekkers and guides rushed to break up the fight, pulling me away from Raj and Emily. In the aftermath, Emily tearfully apologized, claiming it was a moment of weakness and promising it would never happen again. I was devastated. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and heartbroken. For the rest of the trek, I could barely look at Emily, let alone speak to her. When we reached Everest Base Camp the next day, the achievement felt hollow. The majestic peaks, the icefall, the sense of accomplishment, none of it mattered. All I could think about was Emily's betrayal. I stood there, looking up at the towering summit of Everest, feeling small and insignificant. On our way back, we took a detour to Rai, hoping the breathtaking views of the turquoise lakes and the towering Himalayas would provide some distraction from the turmoil. The trek to Rai was challenging, but the scenery was stunning. However, the beauty of the place was lost on me. My mind was consumed with the events of that night, replaying the scene over and over. When we returned to Kathmandu, Emily begged for my forgiveness. She promised that she would never repeat her mistake. Still reeling from the betrayal, I reluctantly said it was okay. But the words felt hollow. We spent the next few days in Kathmandu, but the city that had seemed so vibrant and exciting now felt oppressive. We barely spoke, and when we did, it was stilted and awkward. It's been almost a year since that fateful trip, and the wound is still raw. Every time I look at Emily, the memory of that night near Everest Base Camp resurfaces, a painful reminder of the trust that was shattered. My love for Emily was deep, but her betrayal left an indelible mark on my heart. I can't forget the image of her with Raj, and though I try to move past it, the trust is irrevocably broken. Even now, a year later, the shadow of that betrayal looms over our relationship, a constant reminder of the fragility of trust and the enduring pain of heartbreak. We tried counseling, but each session felt like reopening the wound. Trust can be rebuilt, but it takes time and effort from both sides. The counselor asked me how I felt about the progress we'd made so far. I know she's trying, and I appreciate that. But every time I think we've moved forward, I remember that night, and it all comes rushing back, I said, looking at Emily. Emily, her eyes filled with tears, replied, "Joe, I know I hurt you deeply, and I will regret that for the rest of my life. I love you, and I'll do whatever it takes to make things right." I love you too, Emily, but it's not easy to forget. Sometimes I wonder if things will ever be the same, I said, feeling the weight of the words. The journey to Everest Base Camp was supposed to be a dream come true. Instead, it became a nightmare that I can't wake up from. I'm trying to move forward, to rebuild what we had, but the road is long and uncertain. I hope one day I can look at Emily without the pain and betrayal clouding my vision. Until then, I take it one day at a time, hoping that time will heal the wounds and restore the love we once had. The mountains taught me that the journey is just as important as the destination. I just hope that this journey will lead us back to each other, stronger and more resilient than before. But for now, the shadow of that betrayal looms large, and the path to healing is long and arduous. Every step forward feels like a struggle, and every reminder of that night near Everest Base Camp pulls me back. Despite everything, I still have hope. Hope that one day the pain will fade, and the love we once shared will be enough to rebuild our shattered trust. Until then, I will continue to climb the mountains of our relationship, one step at a time, towards a future that is still uncertain. but filled with the possibility of redemption and forgiveness. During one of our counseling sessions, the counselor suggested we take another trip, a shorter one, to see if we could reconnect. Reluctantly, we agreed and planned a weekend getaway to a cabin in the mountains. The drive up was silent, each of us lost in our own thoughts. The cabin was cozy, nestled among tall pines with a clear view of the mountains. It should have been the perfect place to rekindle our relationship. The first night, we sat by the fireplace, sipping hot cocoa. The crackling fire and the cold mountain air created a serene atmosphere, but the tension between us was palpable. We talked about trivial things, avoiding the elephant in the room. As the night wore on, we finally addressed the issue. Joe, I know I've hurt you deeply, and I can see that it's hard for you to trust me again. But I need you to know that I'm committed to making this work, Emily said, her voice trembling. I know, Emily, and I want to believe you. But every time I look at you, I see you with Raj. It haunts me, I replied, my voice heavy with emotion. I wish I could take it back, but all I can do is show you that I'm here for you, that I love you, she said, reaching out to hold my hand. I squeezed her hand, hoping that this small gesture could bridge the gap between us. The next day, we hiked through the forest, the crisp air filling our lungs. It felt good to be in nature, away from the distractions of daily life. As we walked, we talked about our past adventures, reminiscing about the good times. For a moment, it felt like old times, but the shadow of the betrayal lingered. That evening, we decided to write letters to each other, expressing our feelings and hopes for the future. As I poured my heart onto the paper, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe this exercise could help us heal. When we exchanged letters, I read Emily's words, filled with remorse and a deep desire to make things right. Her sincerity moved me, and for the first time in months, I felt a small crack in the wall I'd built around my heart. The rest of the weekend was spent exploring the area, cooking meals together, and talking about our dreams. It wasn't a magical fix, but it was a start. When we returned home, the tension had lessened, and we both felt a renewed sense of hope. Over the following months, we continued counseling and worked on rebuilding our relationship. It wasn't easy, and there were days when the pain seemed unbearable, but slowly, we started to find our way back to each other. We planned more trips, shorter ones at first, to places that held special meaning for us. Each journey was a step towards healing, a chance to create new memories to replace the painful ones. One day, about a year after our fateful trek, Emily surprised me with a trip back to Nepal. I know it holds a lot of pain for you, but I think we need to face it together to find closure, she said. I was hesitant, but I agreed. Returning to the place where our relationship was tested felt like a daunting task, but I knew it was necessary. When we arrived in Kathmandu, the memories flooded back, but this time we faced them together. We revisited the temples, the markets, and even the tiny airport in Lukla. This time, our trek was different. We moved at a slower pace, taking the time to appreciate the journey rather than focusing solely on the destination. We talked openly about our feelings, the pain, and the hope for the future. When we reached the base camp, we stood there together, looking up at Everest, and for the first time, I felt a sense of peace. Emily took my hand and said, Joe, I love you, and I'm grateful for this second chance. I know we still have a long way to go, but I believe in us. I love you too, Emily, and I'm willing to keep climbing, no matter how tough it gets, I replied, squeezing her hand. The journey back to each other was long and arduous, but it was worth it. We learned that love isn't always perfect, and sometimes it requires facing our deepest fears and insecurities. The mountains taught us that the journey is just as important as the destination, and that the climb is always worth it, no matter how steep. As we stood there, at the roof of the world, I realized that our love had survived the ultimate test, and though the shadow of betrayal would always be a part of our story, it no longer defined us. Instead, it became a testament to our resilience and our unwavering commitment to each other. We returned home with a renewed sense of purpose and a deeper understanding of what it means to truly forgive and move forward. Our love had been tested, but it had also been strengthened. And though the path ahead was still uncertain, we knew that as long as we faced it together, we could overcome anything. The mountains had taught us many lessons, but the most important one was this: true love isn't about never making mistakes. It's about facing those mistakes together, learning from them, and emerging stronger on the other side. And so, we continued our journey, hand in hand, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that our love was worth fighting for.